might be helping with diagnosing the flu. We'll tell you about that coming up. And meet a hero from Pearl Harbor, plus a conversation with legendary musician Michael McDonald. Mid-morning starts right now. Good morning, everyone. A dangerous virus is spreading in China, and U.S. officials are worried it could come here. China has more than 200 confirmed cases of this virus, which produces pneumonia-like symptoms. 3 people have died from the illness, and it has spread to at least 3 other Asian countries. New video sent to CBS News claims now that a hospital staff was wearing protective gear in Wuhan, China, considered to be ground zero for that outbreak. Here's the very latest now from China.
At 3 airports across the United States, the CDC is on guard. More than 100 officials in San Francisco, Los Angeles, and New York are screening incoming passengers from Wuhan, China, to detect the deadly coronavirus.
If it's issues that are going to affect others, it's maybe good choices to be cautious about it.
Since Friday, the number of known infections across Asia has more than quadrupled, with cases confirmed in China, Thailand, Japan, and now South Korea, which reported its first case this morning. Authorities say most of the cases link back to this now shuttered animal and seafood market in Wuhan. U.S. health officials are concerned this rapid spread could mimic the massive SARS outbreak of the early 2000s, which resulted in 774 deaths in 29 countries. But so far, it does not appear that this disease is easily transmittable between people. Health officials say this strain of the coronavirus has been spread to humans through exposure in handling of animals at the market.
If the virus turns out to be readily transmissible from human to human, then we'll have a much larger problem on our hands.
Dr. William Schaffner says public health authorities are already working on ways to fend off the epidemic.
There are laboratories around the world already working on really good diagnostic tests, and we've already started to work on a vaccine in the event that's necessary.
Now, I lived through the epidemic of SARS back in Beijing in 2003, and the government at that time came under massive criticism about a lack of transparency. They withheld a lot of information from the public about that growing massive epidemic. Now, this will be a question of whether the government has learned from past mistakes in order to protect their country's future. Raimi Inocencio, CBS News, Wuhan, China.
All right, that wearable device that you're using may be doing more than just tracking your steps and monitoring your heart rate. Reed Binion brings us a new study that might have you rethinking exactly what it can do. Take a look.
It's probably the most popular fitness tracker on the market, and now your Fitbit could help predict when you'll get the flu. And with its data sharing, it could even help health officials predict outbreaks. Scripps Research Translational Institute analyzed data of 47,000 users who wore their Fitbits consistently between March 2016 and March 2018 in 5 states. They monitored changes in users' average heart rate and sleeping patterns to identify when the user could have the flu. Someone suffering from the flu tends to have an elevated heart rate and changes in their sleep pattern. Researchers then compared the data to weekly flu reports in their states, put out by the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The result, essentially real-time flu prediction. Since response time is key when it comes to disease outbreaks, the authors of the study hope this can be used to improve response time for cities and states to react to flu outbreaks. As technology becomes more advanced, perhaps even getting daily instead of weekly updates, traditional surveillance reporting can take 1 to 3 weeks, limiting the ability for a quick response. For today's Health Minute, I'm Reed Binion.
Well, this is a popular snack for a lot of us, and it can be healthy, but it just depends on how you eat it. I'm talking about popcorn. It is in its purest form, plain air-popped kernels. It is a low-calorie, low-fat snack. But when you throw in the movie theater goodness, popped in coconut oil with salt and a buttery topping, the healthy snack goes out the window. According to the Center for Science in the Public Interest, a medium bucket of popcorn holds 20 cups and contains 1,200 calories. It also has 3 days worth of saturated fat. So even if you only ate 3 cups, which is probably unlikely, you would still consume about half a day's worth of saturated fat. Health experts say it's better to limit the salt and the butter on your popcorn and consider adding herbs like basil, oregano, or red pepper flakes. But that's just no fun, is it? All right, coming up, more than medals and ribbons. The honor will have a former seaman's name front and center. That story is next on Mid-Morning. Welcome back, everyone. As the nation remembers Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. this week, the Navy is also remembering a hero from Pearl Harbor. David Martin has a story that has been a long time in telling.
The aircraft carrier is the symbol of American power. 90,000 tons of diplomacy, the Navy likes to say. Almost all of them are named after presidents, until Acting Secretary of the Navy Thomas Modly broke with tradition. So the list of carriers is going to read Washington, Lincoln, Roosevelt, Reagan, Truman, Eisenhower, Bush, Ford, Kennedy, Miller.
Exactly right. And I like it when you put it that way.
That's Miller as in Dory Miller. The next aircraft carrier to be built will be named for the grandson of slaves and son of sharecroppers. The official announcement is tomorrow.
We've decided to do this on Martin Luther King's birthday out at Pearl Harbor.
His closest surviving relatives, Floretta Miller and Brenda Haven, are still getting used to having a carrier named for their Uncle Dory, who served in the segregated Navy of World War II.
That's a great honor, because it's been a hard, long road.
He was born in Waco, Texas, and his first name was actually Doris. So I've never heard of a man named Doris. Where did that name come from?
My grandma thought she was having a girl, and it wasn't a girl. Doris turned out to be a boy, so that's where that name came from.
Waco has been described in those years as the place where the Old South met the Wild West. And like much of America back then, Jim Crow ruled.
White man was yes, sir. White lady, yes, ma'am. You didn't disrespect whatsoever. Don't care how old you are.
There were no economic opportunities for a young black man, so he joined the Navy. At least there, the pay was steady.
Navy policy at that time limited blacks to those duties that were manual, that they thought didn't require a whole lot of intellect.
Regina Akers is a historian with the Naval History and Heritage Command.
When Dory Miller came in, he was limited to the messman's branch pretty much.
What does a mess attendant do?
Basically, a mess attendant takes care of an officer. You lay out his clothes, you shine his shoes, and then you serve in the officer's mess.
Miller served aboard the battleship West Virginia, which on Sunday morning, December 7th, 1941, was tied up on Battleship Row in Pearl Harbor.
Dory Miller had just finished serving breakfast and he was sorting laundry.
The West Virginia was hit by 9 Japanese torpedoes and 2 bombs. Miller was ordered to the bridge to evacuate the ship's captain, who lay mortally wounded. What happened next was dramatized by Cuba Gooding Jr. in the movie Pearl Harbor. Against all rules, Miller manned a machine gun.
The irony of this is that back in the 40s, pre-World War II, African Americans were not allowed to have any jobs where they handled machine guns or any type of lethal force.
When the Navy, which Miller had joined in 1939, awarded medals to those who had fought bravely, it didn't even mention the name Doris Miller. Why wouldn't the Navy, right from the start, at least identify him by name instead of calling him an unknown Negro sailor?
Well, see, you'd have to be a Negro in 1939 to understand that. The status of African Americans, they were treated like second-class citizens.
4 months later, the Pittsburgh Courier, perhaps the leading African-American newspaper of the day, finally published the name, and the Secretary of the Navy grudgingly gave him a letter of commendation.
In his opinion, that's all he warranted. However, others disagreed. The press, black and white press, disagreed. The National Association for the Advancement of Colored People disagreed.
As recorded on Miller's service card in the Navy archives, there it is.
There you go.
President Roosevelt stepped in and ordered him awarded the Navy Cross.
That was not without controversy. There were some people who did not want him to receive the Navy Cross.
Because of his race?
Because of his race.
He received the medal from Admiral Chester Nimitz, who noted Miller was the first person of his race to receive such a high honor.
He understood the importance of having a black hero to encourage other blacks to support the Navy's war effort.
Miller went on a speaking tour and became a black celebrity in the same league as heavyweight champion Joe Louis and singer Lena Horne.
Some considered him just as important, just as aspirational, drew just as much hope from him.
Is he comfortable with his celebrity?
No, not at all. His goal was really to get to his next ship.
He was assigned to the aircraft carrier Liscum Bay, which less than a year after Pearl Harbor was sunk by a Japanese torpedo. Dory Miller was never seen again.
It's kind of hard thinking of my grandmother, her hurt. She used to say, had I been a white woman, they would have treated me better. But I'm a black woman, and my son is a hero.
Over the years, his legacy has been honored, including with this larger-than-life statue in his hometown of Waco. But that's nothing like having an aircraft carrier named after him. How many carriers are there right now?
Right now we have 11.
So this is an honor reserved for very few Americans.
Absolutely.
The last carrier to be christened was the John F. Kennedy by his daughter Caroline. Construction has not yet begun on the Miller.
Before this ship actually gets into the water, it's probably 7 or 8 years from now.
And once it gets into the water, how long is it going to be around?
50 years.
And like everything else that's celebrated about Dory Miller, it's going to draw some criticism, rest assured.
So what would be the criticism?
Some may suggest it's more than he deserves. Some may say he was just a guy who did his job when general quarters went off on a ship. What's the big deal?
What was your personal reaction?
Oh, I was overwhelmed. It is tremendous. And it's a reminder, too, that heroism is in no way limited by race, by gender, by background, by rank or rating.
And this ceremony is going to take place on Martin Luther King Day.
You never would have thought my uncle would have been next to Martin Luther King, or even the same day. Now that's beautiful.
When we come back, his life went from darkness to possibilities, all because of a group that helps people in the music business who've lost their way. An amazing story next on Mid Morning.